Yo, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? Good to see you again. And I know a lot of people have been asking about what is the deck profile of the Doflamingo list that you use. I've been providing the list and it's been getting updated here and there, and I really like where it's been going. I enjoy where I found myself with the list now. I think that every part of, how the deck plays ends up working out really well. There obviously, with any deck, are good matchups and bad matchups, but it does feel as though even your bad matchups or your unfavorable ones still are winnable, but it does come down to what cards are you seeing and are you making the correct decisions. But hey, before we get into the full breakdown of this deck list, we do have a sponsor for today's video, and it is me. So I do have the pre-orders for the playmats still up right now, and we will be getting them in a week. I'm super excited. We've got a ton of these amazing playmats, all stitched edges, as well as just absolutely incredible quality coming out. I love the look of it. It was my first custom design playmat that we made, and I'm really excited to have some more in the future, but this is going to be the flagship playmat, and it looks great. I am so excited. I cannot say thank you enough to those of you who have already pre-ordered one, but if you want to get your hands on one, just go and check out TheLuffyTCG.com, and thank you for supporting the channel. So first off, why Doflamingo? Well, the leader ability is insane. I mean, being able to reactivate 2 Dawn at the end of your turn and having just green and purple events that are so good and provide a ton of utility but a lot of defense as well, just makes this list a very scary one to deal with. On top of that, being green and purple, you are able to utilize the film package. Now, I do run the film Doflamingo. This is not the, I've seen some people kind of cooking up like a supernova or, other like Doflamingo family lists, and I don't think that they're bad, but I don't think that they're quite full yet. Like, they can't get where they want to be without certain cards that we'll potentially see in the future. Right now, the film package does seem like it's the most complete list, and it just provides a lot of utility, a lot of draw power, and moments where you wouldn't be able to get out of it if you were playing another deck. So the pros of having a leader such as Doflamingo are that with the film package, you are given a ton of draw power. Between Nami, Buena Festa, as well as Guild Tesoro, you are just able to absolutely flood your hand with resources and continuously have options to either get out of attacks or to present you with an attack the following turn. Also, with the film package, you have the ability to flood the board extremely easily. With combination cards like Brooke as well as Luffy, you can just build your board extremely wide and go for game, as well as defend yourself using some of the blockers and potentially some of the restand events such as Spider's Web. You also can't forget the basic aspect of your leader. Your leader is able to reactivate 2 Rested Dawn at the end of each turn, and that just provides so much value. Your opponent now has to play around the potential that you have a event card that can rest, a 4 cost or less. You have an event card that could also restand one of your blockers or something that they were trying to KO that turn. You also have the ability to potentially ramp up a Dawn depending on what your life state is at the moment. And lastly, the film package is fantastic. Just being able to consistently search for other film cards using whether it's Buena Festa, Nami, it just allows you to find the resources you need or the pieces that you need to use those combination cards or to play defensively, and it gives you answers to situations that you might otherwise not be able to find. So as far as the cons of the deck, I do think that the pros make up for what these cons are, but they are worth noting. The deck does have a lack of removal, so you do not have cards that are able to easily KO your opponent's characters on play, or whether that's when attacking. Just the lack of removal can hurt sometimes when you are trying to maintain board control. But also, drawing dead sometimes is just a reality of the game, but it's a very big reality of this deck, is you can see a lot of events in hand, or quite the opposite, you see no events in hand, and you'll end up drawing into, multiple copies of counterless cards. And that's also what some of the searches can do for you, is the searches will be able to find, maybe let's say you needed a blocker, you're able to find that Luffy or that Uta, but at the same time, you are bottom decking maybe 2 events, maybe 2 10-cost Doflamingos. So it does have a little bit of give and take as far as the draw power is concerned. And that's why you do need to have a little bit of, practice with some of the reps of these matchups, because that can end up biting you at the very end of some matches. So let's talk about some of the characters of the list, and the first I wanted to start off with the searchers. We do have Buena Festa as well as Nami, both of which can search film type cards, and the beauty of that is that this deck is half film type cards. There are 25 cards in the deck that are of that film archetype. While they cannot search themselves, they can search each other, which is really nice. So Nami can find Buena, Buena can find Nami, and it makes it so that, you are able to find more searchers with your searchers. The beauty of Nami as well is being able to use that on play / when attacking. Just pay the 1 Dawn and you can find almost any card guaranteed within those top 3. And if you don't, you only ended up losing 1 Dawn for the search. It's not having to have played a card and lost the counter out of hand, because that is the beauty of Buena Festa as well, is that it does have that 2k counter. So sometimes you do want to keep that in hand depending on the situation. Now, speaking of 2k counters, we have 10 in the deck. We have 4 of the Buena Festas, 4 of the Tony Chopper, and 4 of the Shiki. They are all searchable, so that makes them extremely valuable. But also on top of that is that they do have their unique purposes. So Buena Festa, obviously being a searcher, we love that. And Tony Chopper is pretty much never played in almost every matchup except for Law. This card is an incredible tech for Law. You can rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less. This can be a lot of those chump, 1 cost blockers that they have. There's so many options that Chopper allows. And I think that I did play it up against a Zoro one time, but I did learn afterwards that it's really hard to get the card down early, because a lot of the times your opponent is just going to play Marco and it gets KO'd and it feels as though you've wasted this card. But in the Law matchup, unless they have Vista, it's usually speaking a card that gains a lot of value. Now Shiki, I've never used the trigger in any match. It's pretty much a throwaway 2k counter, but I have had a situation where I played a Brooke into a Shiki, because I think that in certain matchups like Zoro, you definitely want to have just multiple characters on the board if possible. And it's just an option, but more or less, it's really a throwaway 2k counter. Next up, we have our blockers, and we do have 3 of them. We have Uta, Luffy, and Queen. Uta and Luffy obviously being film cards, so they are searchable by Buena Festa and Nami. Queen, not so much, but Queen has a purpose, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But Uta is fantastic. Obviously, you are going to be using Luffy into this combination of playing Uta, or Luffy into Brooke, or Luffy into Nami. But Luffy Uta just feels so unbelievably good. It's insane. And I mean, Uta's ability alone just speaks for itself why the card is in the deck. On block, Don -1, rest one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less. It is an incredibly valuable blocker. And the beauty of that is that when your opponent is swinging, you can just use Uta as a block, right? Don -1, and you can restand it using events. You can save it using counters. It has endless value, and there's so many matchups where this card, can just simply be used as a normal block and not even having to go Don -1. But I love using the effect because it can possibly be game winning using that Uta. But the Luffy blocker is obviously one of the most staple cards in the deck. I did experiment with running it only at 3 for a little while, and then I realized that I was crazy, and 4 has to be the number. I was trying 3, and didn't mind it, but there were games that I didn't see this card, and those are games that you just lose. I mean, having Luffy on board is incredibly helpful. That 7k blocker is like, it allows you to get out of so many attacks a lot easier than normal. You know, if your opponent's coming at you with a 9k swing at your leader, you can just rest Luffy and use the event. It really does kind of change up the whole matchup having this on board. Now, Queen is here because of the beautiful thing about this Queen right here is correcting your hand. I have had far too many games where I've had 3 7-cost Luffys sitting in my hand, and I can't just play them back to back. I didn't have enough film cards to, you know, chain the effect. I could just play the blocker itself and call it a day, but it just didn't feel right. I said I'd prefer to have other cards at my disposal, so that's why Queen is in here. It can correct you off of the odd curve and put you back onto the evens. It can also trash a counterless card like Luffy, Guild, Nami, 10-cost Doflamingo. Get those cards out of hand that you might not need in the moment and draw into 2 new ones and potentially gain some resources. And now the star of the deck, Guild Tesoro. This card allows you to draw into an endless amount of resources. Getting to 10 Dawn and then using that Dawn -2 effect is basically a free 2-card draw every single turn. You know, you're getting back those 2 Dawn the following turn, so it's not that big of a deal. The beauty of this card is that it is a high power, so you can attach 1 Dawn and swing pretty freely for 7k. The draw power obviously is incredible. I'm running it at 3 because it does feel as though you can brick sometimes and get a lot of these in hand. And this isn't a card that you need in order to win, but it is a card that helps you win for sure. And so to bring back up Queen, that's why these two are specifically in the deck. A lot of the times you can find yourself in weird situations where you have counterless cards in your hand, or you just don't have enough events and you really need to draw into some of those. Well, you can't with Buena Festa and Nami. You have to find some other means to be able to get into those event cards. And that's where Guild and Queen come into play. You know, Queen is going to be, you know, trashing one of those counterless cards and drawing into, hopefully, one of those event cards, or maybe, you know, some blocker that you might need. Guild is just, you know, unbelievable 2-card draw every single turn. And the beauty of this card in particular to me in this list is that a lot of people will prioritize, oh, he's going to go for 10 Dawn and get Doflamingo. Well, if you don't have Doflamingo, then there's no point in getting to 10 Dawn, right? You can get there, and yeah, sure, maybe the 2 extra Dawn might be, you know, slightly helpful, but I would rather have 2 extra cards in hand and then just continue with the board that I have here and make it harder for my opponent to remove, and then I can just continuously play blockers, but feel as though I'm countering out for free every single turn. With OP04 leaders coming into the current mix of the meta, there's a lot of slower playing decks than there were in the past. A lot of red decks were as fast as possible and as low to the ground as possible so that they could be extremely aggressive. And now with a lot of these slower playing decks, as well as red still being prevalent in the meta, you need to be able to get a board that is as wide as possible so that you have multiple swings and you have multiple opportunities of pulling resources from your opponent's hand, but also simultaneously maintaining board control. And Luffy and Brooke are the combination cards that allow you to do this. Brooke being able to play Usopp, or to play Nami, or to even potentially play Chopper or Buena Festa for a search is extremely valuable. Just having that extra body on the board from the on-play effect is incredibly useful. Luffy doing the same thing. You can chain Luffy into Brooke into Nami and have a 3-character play that might also result in a search, depending on if you have 8 Dawn or not. So these cards really allow you to play against some of those slower matchups like Queen, Crocodile, Rebecca, Zoro, and many more. And of course, we're running 4 of each of Sugar as well as Don Quixote Doflamingo. Both of these cards just have so much utility in the deck, and they are incredible in various matchups. You know, Doflamingo has his moments where the matchup is, you know, not that great for him to be played, so that's the beauty of having Queen as well as Tesoro, is just to be able to draw into more cards in case that happens to be a dead card in your hand. Also Sugar, just being able to rest your opponent's blockers, but also having them, or excuse me, forcing them to play around that character, whether that rests, you know, a valuable blocker, or it rests a card that was about to be played having Rush. I think that Sugar is definitely a card that needs to be practiced out through matchups, because there are certain timings that being able to play this card can make your opponent incredibly inconvenienced. And last but not least, we have the events. We've got 3 Punk Gibson, 4 Spiderweb, as well as 3 Thunder Bagua. I think that each of these have their unique reason why they're in the deck, and I'll start with Punk Gibson. It speaks for itself. The trigger is insane, just being able to rest one of your opponent's characters. The counter going up plus 4,000 for a leader or a character, and then resting an opponent's character with a cost of 4 or less. It can rest an attacker. It can rest a blocker. The card just has way too much value, and it's perfect for this list. I do run 4 of the Spider's Web because it is the best event card, in my opinion, for this list. It's incredibly useful. The trigger doesn't get used as much, but if you get that as your last life in a game where you have multiple swings coming at you, plus 2,000 power to your leader for the turn can be extremely helpful, right? But as far as counter power is concerned, we're going up plus 4,000 and then setting a character as active. That's why in this list, you need to be aggressive with your blockers. If you have Spider's Web in hand, there's no reason why you shouldn't be attacking with your blockers. Well, okay, maybe there's some reasons, but that's very situational. But I would say 9 times out of 10, I'm attacking with my blockers and then restanding them using this for the following turn. It is absolutely incredible. Thunder Bagua is in the list because we do have cards such as Uta and Queen. They are subtracting Dawn from us, and this allows us to correct it. It also happens to be really useful if you're not going second. If your opponent chooses to go second and you're on that odd curve, this allows you to get back up into the evens. So get your life down to 2 or less. Use Thunder Bagua to get back up. And then the trigger, just being able to add a Dawn card and set it as active, can also be incredibly useful. So the card as a whole is absolutely amazing. And I personally think that these are the event cards that are worthwhile running in this list. All right, and I also wanted to mention some honorable mentions, but also some potential techs that you could put into the deck. I have Diamante here, not as a potential tech. It's more as a potential substitution. It's not equivalent, but potential substitution if you cannot get yourself your hands on Queen. I know that Queen is a very expensive card. I know that finding some of the starter decks are not easy for everybody. I was able to get them when they first came out back in December of last year, so I've had them for a very long time. But the Diamante is, you know, the same cost, 5 costs, 6k power, 1k counter. You're not getting that +1 of having an extra card in hand, but it is a 7k swing every single turn that turns into a blocker the turn after, which is very nice. And like I said, it's not a direct substitution, but it is something that you can give a shot. And now we also have the Vanilla Zoro. This also could be Bins. Bins is an option here, either one. They're both just film 4-cost vanilla cards, and I think that if you are planning or anticipating to play up against a lot of Whitebeard, this is a fantastic card. I did enjoy having it in my list when I was teching for Whitebeard, but the more that I played against the matchup, I felt as though I enjoyed Brooke more for the rest of the decks that I'd be competing against, and just playing around Whitebeard in a different manner. So that's how I went about that. But we also have Union Armado. Union Armado is, I'm not the hugest fan of this card. However, I know some people swear by it. I do think that it has some really interesting moments that the card can be extremely useful. The trigger is also the same as Thunder Bagua, so, you know, arguably you could just cut one Thunder Bagua and run one of these unions as like a little tech card in the list. It's a searchable event card, which is extremely useful since the rest of the others are not, but you cannot use it on your leader. It can only be used on characters because it has to be a film type leader or a character card. And that's where I kind of run into my indifference about this card in the list. And we also have the weak do not have the right to choose how they die. I know that's a mouthful. It's kind of a crazy card, but it is it's a card that I've found myself wanting to try out. I did test it out a little bit. It did feel as though I was just bottom decking it more often than not, but just having a one of in the list doesn't feel like a terrible idea. It's just, it's tough because you have to draw into the card. You're more than likely going to bottom deck it very often through many of your matches, through your searches. But if you do happen to draw into it, there are these weird situations that you'll get yourself into where you could potentially have like 4 characters, maybe even 5 characters on board that are attacking, and you're trying to play around, okay, will they end up getting a trigger that takes one of these out? So I'm not going to attach any Dawn. I'm just going to swing 5, swing 6, whatever, right? And you'll find yourself in a position where now you're passing turn and you've got like 6 open Dawn or something. This is a card that I could see being used as a counter, a really sneaky counter, making them think that you have 3 events when in reality you're just using 1 that does an absolutely insane ability. But you also have, you know, the potential of using it as a main, you know, resting one of your opponent's leader or character cards, then KOing an opponent rested character card with a cost of 6 or less. Not bad, and with the lack of removal that this deck has, it could be a potential option. So just like any other deck, you're going to have matches that are favorable for you and matches that are unfavorable. Some of the matches that you play well into would consist of Katakuri, Whitebeard, and Law. Law can be a little hard if they high roll and get some insanely, you know, good luck as far as being able to bounce back searchers and just not whiffing any searches that they put down. But that's the name of the game when it comes to playing against Law. You know, if they high roll, it's a very, very tough list to beat. Katakuri is a very free matchup. Katakuri is pretty much take every single life, don't defend your life at all, and then you just play blockers and consistently swing at your opponent's life until they have no cards in hand, and then usually by then it's a pretty easy game. Whitebeard is a bit of a weird matchup. You want to try and get at least 3 bodies on the board. That's what I've found, is if you can have 3 swings on the board and your leader, then you can usually end the game within 2 to 3 turns. But it does take some time. The toughest part about the matchup is dealing with Ace, and the easiest way to deal with that is to play Sugar and then rest the Ace and then go for Ace, or to you know, play your blocker Luffys and keep that Sugar alive so that you can constantly rest some of the problems that will be coming in the future. And some of your more unfavorable matchups are pretty much any deck that's blue. So Croc, Rebecca, Queen, and then also including Zoro. Zoro has a lot of removal, and just that removal power is extremely annoying to deal with. Whether it's Fire Fist, Jet Pistol, using Gordon to reduce the power of something. It makes using your events to restand stuff a little bit harder. It means you have to dedicate more resources to defending them. And then a lot of the times you'll defend them and then they'll just get removed either way. So that does feel kind of bad. And then as far as blue, just playing against anything that has 3,000 Worlds, Red Rock, 9-cost Mihawk, any of these cards that pretty much just bounce your cards back, bottom deck your blockers, get rid of your draw power, is going to be a very, very hard matchup. And yeah, this is the list. These are the ratios that I use for each of the cards. I know I didn't mention Usopp in the top right, but I do play the one of. I have, originally I was at 3 Shiki, but I decided to just swap it out for another hit that would go onto either Brooke or Luffy. It just makes it so that there's a little more consistency with getting as wide as possible on the deck. But the deck plays super well. It's incredibly fun. And I know that there are a lot of matchups that, you know, for me personally have been incredibly, like, you know, interesting to play against. And I can't wait to see, you know, how I can perform with this list in some of the regionals and treasure cups that are coming up. But yeah, that's about it. The list is super fun. It's a lot of, you know, good matchups, but also sprinkled in with a little bit of bad matchups. But you can still capitalize on those bad matchups and play really well. I think that the deck has, you know, maybe some things that could be changed to tech for certain matchups if you're expecting different things. But I think overall this is like a base understanding of what you're gonna run in a film Doflamingo list. But yeah, what are you guys' thoughts? And if you got any questions on some of the matchups, let me know and I can try and answer some of, you know, what I've experienced. But I still think I have a lot of practice to do myself, so that's going to be a lot of fun. And other than that, I hope that you check out the website. You know, some of the play mats are going to be here in, I think, probably about a week, and I'll be shipping them out. So hope to hear from, you know, a lot of people as far as the feedback on that, and I'm super excited. But thank you as always, guys, and I hope you have a great day, all right? Peace.